Alright, we're working on this 2005 GMC Sierra here today. We're going to be replacing the water pump. It's just started kind of trickling out at this point, but it had lost like a gallon of coolant. So I'm just going to show you what I've got here. Okay, so here's a look at this water pump, and you can see it's like a whole giant assembly. Now some you will just simply unbolt like the pulley and the pump. You know, it's mounted to the front cover, timing cover, whatever you want to call it. But in some cases you have a whole big unit. In this case it's this whole piece, so we're going to have to be able to remove this whole piece, which is no doubt going to require moving some other things. Now you can see places where we're going to need gaskets, and they have provided we got the two gaskets, and it looks like we got one here for this, and then we've got another O-ring. Not for sure on that, unless that's an alternative gasket for that there. Got a couple of jugs of coolant, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get this part of this air duct out of the way. Now there is a little clip that clips to this right here, and it also clips to the bottom. You just pop that little hose out, but you got to go in with a little pick tool and push down on that part right there, and this will pop off. Okay, so the only other thing we're going to do, take a flat or an 8mm, just go ahead and loosen these bands up right here. Then we're going to come over to this one and just go ahead and loosen that band up. And then we should be able just to pop this off of here, and this will clear up a little. Okay, I think I'm going to have to go a little bit more on this one right here. It's not quite loose enough. Let's try it now. Okay, it's just a little bit more stuck. Okay, so we just go ahead and pop this up and out of here, and it's got a little lower piece that goes down in there as well. Okay, I've got my long ratchet of 15mm. I'm going to get right here on this. This is very easy to move, so you just go in that direction and just go ahead and pop that belt off of there. We'll get that out of the way. Okay, for the lower belt that runs the AC compressor, we're just going to use this 3/8 end, and we're going to get down here and get on this tensioner. And we don't really need to get this, but the main thing is we don't want coolant getting all over, so we're going to push that in that direction. We'll go ahead and pop that off of there. Okay, now you could go ahead and start draining the coolant out, and if you go down here to this side, now what you should have is a valve right there. You can see where I'm looking at. You can see that is broken, so we can't do anything with that. But really, it's just as easy to go ahead and just remove. What I'm going to do, we're going to be having to replace this gasket and everything, so I'm just going to take these bolts out right here, and we're going to get a couple pans down here to catch it, and we're just going to drain as much as we can from this point. You know, regardless, when we go to unbolting this part of the pump, we're going to have more coolant back in this block. Now, depending on the model, it holds, you know, quite a bit. I think it's like 15 up to 20 quarts capacity, depending on your model. But you can see where we got to get to all of our bolts and stuff here. We've got lots of things to remove, but we're going to start here with these 10 millimeters, and we're going to get that loose. We're going to get a couple drain pans down here, and we'll start getting as much coolant as we can, and try to catch as much as we can, and we'll get it poured up into some empty jugs. Alright, so we've got a 10 millimeter. We're going to go ahead and start taking these loose, and they're not real tight. Got our pan down there. And I would expect after you get the bolts loose that you're still going to have to kind of pry this off here possibly. These gaskets tend to stick. But we'll see. Those are getting pretty loose. Okay, it's actually starting to come loose. I'm going to kind of orient my pan a little bit more. Okay, the next thing we're going to remove is this tensioner. It's going to be easier to get it loose while it's still attached to the vehicle. So we're going to go ahead and break these loose. Get on this lower one. So we'll just be transferring this over to our new pump. Okay, I'm going to have to get a shorter ratchet here. Once I've got it loose, it's no need in having the big long ratchet. You can see it's still draining. I've just kind of took it loose, not all the way, because I didn't want it to just start pouring out. However, I will tell you that unless you have a pan as big as the front of your vehicle, you are going to make a little bit of a mess, and all you can do is try to catch as much as you can and get it poured up quickly so no animals get into it, and then just put some cat litter, floor dry or something like that down to get up any of the rest of the coolant. So anyways, I'm going to just keep working these out. Okay, there is a third one back here that I totally didn't even see, but I'm working it out now. I've got these two completely loose. The longer one is on the top and this back side over here, so there's no confusion. I'm just back here working out this final one. And we'll have this completely out of our way. So we'll just transfer it over as once we get the pump into place. We're just taking one thing at a time. Okay, so now we're ready to go ahead and take that piece out of there. Okay, I finished getting those two small bolts out over the thermostat housing, and we don't want to lose our thermostat there. Okay, and as I lower this, it'll be more coolant coming out, so I'm going to get it right over that pan. Now I'm hoping that because we've drained so much, we won't have a lot coming out of the housing as we take it loose, but I'm sure we'll still have some. And I've not quite got a full pan yet. I would say I've got a couple of gallons out of here. We're going to get these heater hoses. These are self-explanatory where they go. Don't need to mark them. One is bigger than the other. You see the rear is a little bit smaller. So we're going to go ahead and get this clamp loose. Okay, now the trick to this is just getting a screwdriver like a pry bar and pushing on that rubber part there back at this angle. and said usually they will not come easily. It's something you're going to have to work with, because they just tend to glue themselves, and it's just going to take some pushing and twisting to kind of get it to come loose there. And you don't want to damage this part, so you have to be careful, because you don't want to be scraping this up and potentially getting a leak there. So we got the first one, and we just got to work on doing the same thing back here. See how I'm just pushing on. So there we go, not too big of a deal. Once you get those loose, half the battle is won. Okay, now I'm getting on this upper hose, this big clamp. These like to fight with you a little bit. Okay, so we got it pulled back. So now we're going to have to do the same thing. If we can't just twist this thing loose, we're going to have to get under it with the screwdriver, because it is not coming loose. Okay, another thing I've found that works well is just a flat, like trim type pry bar, but I've gotten back a hold of these and give them a little nudge, and they actually work pretty well. I've took this and used it on heater hoses and all sorts of stuff. So we got that one loose. Okay, so it's easy enough to see what bolts we have to remove. You flip this thing over to the back side. We just have 3 on this side, 3 on this side, so we've got 6 bolts that come through this, and they go into the water jackets on the engine. And then we've got these gaskets right here that are going to go on that. So we just need to get in here. Those are 10 millimeters. We've got, as you can see, the 3 on this side, and then we've got the 3 over here. And there's no problem getting that to clear. So we're just going to go ahead and get those, start taking those out, and then we'll be able to go ahead and take this whole thing out of here. You can see, if you look right in here, this is not from me taking that loose. It was leaking and running down through the weep hole, as you can see there, which they put that in there for that reason. You know it's going bad. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and work on these, getting these 6 10 millimeters out here. Okay, you can see that we've got these 10s all loose, and we're just getting ready to start taking these out of here. It said it will start leaking out from this housing as well. Now take your time with these bolts. I had one over here in particular that was really tight, and I was worried that it was going to try to break on me, but I just took my time with it, and I did get it out of there. It just looks like it's got a lot of rust and stuff. It needs to be cleaned up a bit. So anyways, we just got this here, and it is coming loose, and I'm pleasantly surprised to see that the gaskets is stuck mostly to the old water pump. So we're going to go ahead and just attempt to pull this up and out of here now. I got this one little hose kind of in my way here. When I poured this up, I got about 2.5 gallons, so that tells me I still got at least 1.5 gallons or more locked up in the engine and radiator. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and clean up the surface. of this, and we're going to go ahead, we'll clean up that spot and that spot a little bit, scrape that off, clean it down so we can get our gaskets on there, and we'll go ahead and get this slapped back into place. Okay, so the first thing I've done is took this little scraper and we went down in there and cleaned those up as best we could and then wiped it off. I'm going to get it dried off and cleaned off really good before we do anything else. Okay, next I'm going to take some RTV. It really doesn't matter what you got, just anything will do. You know, if it's purposely for cooling it'd be better, but you know, the main thing as long as it gets the job done. But we're going to put a thin layer of this RTV on here. Basically this will just stick to it. And then we're going to put a thin layer on this side. And we're going to do the same thing over here. So when we go to mate it up to the engine, we'll have a thin layer of RTV on this surface for our gasket, and we'll have a thin layer on the engine, front of the engine block there. So that's what I'm going to work on. I got some gloves. This stuff is really messy, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so there we got it coated, both sides, and now we're just going to try to get it back down in there without making a big mess. I'm going to put some medium Loctite on these. We're going to be torquing those down to 23 foot-pounds. So we're just going to go ahead and work it in over here now. Okay, so I just carefully hand started the first one there, making sure my gasket's not moving. Fixing to get one started on that top over there, making sure that it's got the gasket lined up, and then we're just going to go ahead and get the rest of them. Putting a little medium Loctite on these. That said, they didn't move around any. I was just careful and set it in there real easy. Okay, the first step, I'm going to go 130 inch or 11 foot-pounds, and then we're going to come back and we're going to go 22. I would not exceed 25 foot-pounds, just due to the size of this bolt. You could snap it or strip thread. So if it doesn't seal off, then you got some other kind of problem, gasket problem or something. So like I said, I wouldn't exceed more than 25. 30 foot-pounds would be pushing it. Okay, now we got our foot-pound set to 22. Now if you don't have any RTV, I have used just basic grease in the past. You dab it down on both sides of that seal and it will seal it off. It has worked. It's kind of something that people used to use, but I prefer the RTV. But anyways, we're going to just start here kind of in the middle on each side, and we're going to go ahead and get 22 foot-pounds, and then we'll start reattaching some other things, tensioners and everything. Okay, now this is the seal. We won't need that because this thermostat, you can see if you have a thermostat like this, it has its own seal. So you want to make sure that this little part here is up, but it just goes and sets in there, and when the housing bolts down, that seals it off. So that's how it was before, and we'll just put it back the same way. No need to use the gasket there. Okay, go ahead and tighten those two small bolts 130 foot-pounds. Now I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and pop these two heater hoses back on, and we'll go ahead and get those clamps back down there. Okay, next up we're going to be putting this tensioner back on here, and so it's going to go right here on these three. We're going to be tightening this to 37 foot-pounds. Not a bad idea to put you a little bit of Loctite on these. These are pretty good size bolts. We're going to go 37 foot-pounds. I'm going to go ahead and get this in place. Okay, the tensioner is locked down, 37 foot-pounds. We're going to go ahead and slip this back on here, and then we'll go ahead and just get this clamp back down there. So it's a good time to check your belts out. This is the one that was running the AC, and it's just about to go. So got another, we're going to go ahead and slap that on there. Okay, so just double check your belt, make sure it's on. Just kind of started on the bottom, looped it around this, back down here, up here under the idler, and then over and around the tensioner. So all looks good here. We're going to go ahead and get our little air intake back in here. Remember, it slips around this hose. We'll tighten up both of those bands. We'll start working on getting some coolant in here, and then we'll start checking it, make sure we don't have any leaks. And we should be able to get at least a couple of gallons or more of coolant to start with. And I've just kind of got, it helps to have one of these tanks to work the air out, but it's not entirely necessary. You can do it without one, just a funnel. Okay, so we got our hose reconnected to that. These bands, 8 millimeters, the flats tightened up. So we're going to go ahead and start getting our coolant in here. And the way I'm going to do it, we're just going to get one jug of this, and we'll get 1 jug of distilled water in here, and then we'll just kind of go from there. Now, I should point out this is the concentrate. If you are using the 50-50 mix, you don't have to worry about mixing any water. Okay, so as it is, I got a whole jug of concentrate, and I've got about 3/4 jug of distilled water, and we're going to have to crank it up and get the air and everything out of here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to check for leaks and everything. Now, there's a little bit of coolant down there that was from earlier, so I'll have to ignore that, but I mainly want to be looking back up here where this pump is bolting up to the engine. That's where we're going to be looking, and we'll check underneath to make sure we don't have any leaks going on there. Okay, after cranking it up, I actually got about another gallon. I went a ½ gallon of coolant, ½ gallon of distilled water, just to kind of see where it's at right there. So we've got plenty in there now. We're just going to make sure that we don't need any more. We're going to run it a little bit, get it warmed up good. Make sure that we got the thermostat. I've been checking here underneath so far, no leaks, which is good. When it first come on, the belts were squealing a little bit, which is, you know, a little bit of coolant probably got on the pulley, so that's to be expected. So we're just going to keep monitoring it. We're going to watch the gauge on the inside and just keep an eye on everything. Just get it up to temperature and get everything opened up good, and try to work as much air out as we can before we take it down the road. Okay, so that's going to conclude the video. I've worked all the air out, and it says a pretty easy job, all things considered. So I hope you found the video helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And as always, I invite you to subscribe, and thanks for watching.